guys, welcome into the Shelby County High School Football Show, a very special edition. As always, I'm Alec Etheridge, your sports editor here at the Shelby County Reporter. We're on location for the first time ever doing this show. We're out at Vincent Middle High School, not only to highlight what the Yellow Jackets have done so far this season, starting 5-2 under head coach Wylo McKellar, who's in year two, a team that has been won in 19 combined the last 2 years before this, so unbelievable start by them. We'll talk about them a little bit later on in our Game of the Week segment, as Vincent hosting Reeltown will be the Game of the Week this week, Week 9 of the high school football season. But we'll also look back at Week 8 and some big matchups, some big storylines as several teams clinched playoff berths and a couple remained unbeaten. So we'll do that, look back at Week 8. We'll look ahead to Week 9, including this game here, our Game of the Week, as well as other matchups. Not the biggest week of football in the county, but we do have some interesting matchups, some teams with playoff implications on the line, speaking of Vincent and Spain Park specifically. So some big matchups this week. We'll talk about those. We'll also get to our SCR Star of the Week segment at the end of the video, as we always do. Several important or great performances this past Friday night, one of which happened right here, and something that is very rarely done. We'll talk about that in our SCR Star of the Week segment, as well as several other great performances from individual athletes and others around the county this past Friday night. But we'll start with our Game of the Week here at Vincent High School. So as we've already mentioned, we are out here at Vincent High School. That's going to be our Game of the Week this Friday night, Week 9 of the high school football season. The season's really winding down. We only have 3 weeks left overall. A lot of teams just 2 region games. Some teams only 1 region game. But this one here for Vincent on Friday night, very important as they host Reeltown. Big playoff implications on the line for both of these teams, as Vincent ends with Reeltown and Ranburne, the 2 teams that they're battling for that 3rd and 4th spot in the region standings. And it starts this Friday night against a Reeltown team, 3-4 overall. They lose 21-7 to Lafayette this past Friday night. Reeltown 3-2 in region play. That's the same record Vincent has in region play as well. Vincent sits 5-2 overall on the season. However, they've won 4 straight, and it's come from some great running from running back Chris Hardy, who went for 355 yards this past Friday night on 31 carries. A workhorse is the definition of that guy right now. And it not only marked a 355-yard game for him, but he has 994 yards overall in their 4-game winning streak. He's averaging over 240 yards a game right now in that 4-game winning streak. Unbelievable what he's doing. It's credit to the offensive line as well. They've had some unbelievable play on the offensive line to help him get those holes opened up. And I mean, there's other great playmakers as well all over the offensive side of the ball, from Dusty Davis at the quarterback position to Xavier Kelly at wide receiver. And a lot of these guys play on both sides, and so it's just unbelievable to see what they're able to do right now. All time, Vincent 1-6 in this series. But they're playing with so much momentum right now, and these teams really on a fairly even playing field. But I think Vincent's got a little bit more momentum right now. Like I said, Reeltown coming off a 21-7 loss to Lafayette. Vincent coming off a big win this past Friday night that got them to 3-2 in region play. So they're playing really good. That was a 32-22 win over Horseshoe Bend for the Yellow Jackets this past Friday night. So they're playing really good, have that load of confidence right now. And the way Chris Hardy's running the ball, you can't not take them in this ball game. That being said, they have a chance with a win Friday night and a Ranburne loss. Ranburne will be taking on Lafayette this Friday night, so they have a good chance to lose. If Vincent can win, Ranburne loses, Vincent goes ahead, locks up at least the 4th seed in a playoff spot. If they do lose, it will go down to that last game with Ranburne the week after this, making this a very important game. But Vincent's playing so good right now. It's exciting that we get to see them behind us right now practicing, warming up for this Friday night. They know how important this game is. They've had some lighthearted fun and enjoyed things early on in this practice warming up. Now they're about to get going. It's going to be fun to see kind of how they handle this situation, being in this light. Like I said, being 1-19 the last 2 years combined, to be in this situation is sort of a new thing for them. So it's going to be how they handle it, how things kind of go from here. But they're playing so good. I predicted 5 wins at the beginning of the season. They got that 5th win last week. Now I'm predicting a playoff berth. I think they get it done this Friday night, because I do believe that Ranburne is going to lose as well. So should be an exciting game. I'll be out here for that game, our Game of the Week. And it's just one of many exciting games. We'll touch on the rest, as we always do, classification by classification, and we'll start in 7A. We'll start the rest of our previews in 7A with the Thompson Warriors, and Thompson has been unbelievable this season. Some historic stuff being done over there in Alabaster for the Warriors. Off to a 7-0 start for the first time since their 1982 state championship season, also averaging close to 500 yards per game so far. And they've clinched their first playoff berth with a win this past week over Spain Park. They pick up a 40-17 win in that one and clinch their first playoff berth since 2006. So in 3 seasons, Mark Freeman has already turned that team around from an 0-10 2014 team. He came in 2 5-5 seasons, now has them sitting at 7-0. And they have a chance to win the region championship in 2 weeks when they take on the Hoover Buccaneers out at the Hoover Met. That will be a very big game, obviously, but to see what Thompson's doing, putting up 40-plus points game after game. They've put up 40 in the last 6 in a row. The last time they didn't was in game 1 of the season. They put up 21 and a win over Hateville Charter from Georgia. So Thompson playing some unbelievable football right now. This week, they get Huffman, and there's not much to say about Huffman. Huffman did challenge Spain Park a couple weeks ago and has challenged some teams specifically on the defensive side of the ball. That being said, they're not going to have nearly enough to compete with what Thompson's offense has put out, and specifically on the offensive side of the ball for Huffman, they're not going to score nearly enough points to keep up. They lose 38-6 this past Friday to Hoover. I see a very similar kind of outcome coming in this game, but especially Huffman giving up 27.4 points per game while Thompson is scoring 44.1 points per game. So a very bad defense against a very good offense. Everything points toward Thompson winning this game big. Last week, one note of point, we'll talk about these guys a little bit more in the SCR Star of the Week, but both Edwards' cousins, Ahmad and Mo, over 100 yards receiving and some touchdowns there between those two guys. So unbelievable to see the offensive numbers they're putting up. The defense has not been talked about enough either, but guys like Miles Brown, KJ Robertson, Jalen Raheem, just to name a few. They have plenty of other linebackers, plenty on the defensive line as well, that have been so solid on that defensive side of the ball. But Thompson right now, I think the best team in the state. They're going to get a big win, easy win over Huffman this Friday night to pick up another big region win and go into that matchup with Hoover, a very key region game for the region championship, undefeated. Spain Park ended up on the losing end of that Thompson-Spain Park matchup, a top 8 battle between those two teams, but Thompson clearly had the upper hand, played a lot better football in that game. That being said, Spain Park has plenty of offensive weapons. It's their defense that's been struggling this year. Right now, they're giving up 26.3 points per game, and early in the season, I pointed out that Coach Rainey, that was a worrisome spot for him in the offseason, but they played so well in those first 3 games of the season. They've gone downhill a little bit since then. But this week they get a 2-6 Tuscaloosa County team. The Wildcats are coming off an upset 33-28 win over Oak Mountain this past Friday night, as they were able to just gash the Eagles defense for basically whatever they wanted. That could give the Wildcats a little bit of confidence moving forward into this game, but Spain Park overall has way more talent across the field on both sides of the ball, but their offense specifically has been unbelievable this year. One of their lowest outputs of the year last week against Thompson shows how good the Warriors are. But with Braxton Barker, Jalen McMillan, Diari Johnson, Jalen Henderson, all those guys, unbelievable athletic talent on the offensive side of the ball. They'll get things going again. They really didn't have a bad game numbers-wise last week. They'll get things going again this week. They should be able to win this one pretty big against the Wildcats. Had Oak Mountain been able to pick up a win last week against Tuscaloosa County, I really thought they had a chance to beat Mountain Brook this week. I still think that it's an upset special. I think that Oak Mountain has enough talent, has the kind of team that could pull an upset in this game, but I think that loss to Tuscaloosa County just shows too much. When you lose to a 1-6 team and give up 33 points in a game, that's not a good sign. But with that being said, they did get Luke Purser back, his first game back from an injury. He looked really good in that loss to Tuscaloosa County. And Connor Webb made some good throws. That's what I think they need to start doing. You have that threat of Purser back. He's a great running back. I think if they can get the pass game going, they saw Nathan Jones make some good catch. Cole Thomas made some good catches. And you always have Carson Bobo, one of the solid tight ends that can play out wide as a wide receiver as well. They have plenty of offensive weapons that they can keep up in this game. They're going up against a good Mountain Brook defense. The big difference, however, is going to be on the defensive side of the ball. Last week against Tuscaloosa County, Oak Mountain gave up 303 rushing yards, 451 total yards, but 303 rushing yards. That's not something that's going to bode well when you're going into a matchup with a team that likes to run the ball first, is going to put a run-heavy offense out there from not just their running backs but their quarterback as well. He can take off if he needs to. So that's what's going to be the difference maker. I expect it to be a close ball game, just simply because Oak Mountain has that kind of team that can keep a game like this close. But in the end, I think that rushing game at Mountain Brook is going to be too much for the Eagles to now be able to pull off the upset that I thought was possible last Friday night before they lost that game to Tuscaloosa County. Another one of those teams that deserves a shout out, just like we're here at Vincent High School for everything they've accomplished this year so far, the Pelham Panthers right now, kind of like Briarwood, Vincent, Thompson, those kind of teams that are having great years, making the playoffs and doing some special things. Head coach Tom Causey had this Pelham team headed in the right direction coming into the year, but with a bunch of juniors, and he did have a lot of upperclassmen, I will say, but most of them juniors. We still thought they were a year away. They've kind of proven to us that they're taking it a little bit quicker than we expected as they clinched their playoff berth this past Friday night with a massive 55-28 win over Chilton County. That offense was clicking on all cylinders, 42 points in the first half. Matthew Rye with an unbelievable game at quarterback there for Pelham. You also had Nick Blackburn, a great game at running back. They have so many offensive weapons, and that's been key so far for them this season. Their defense has struggled at times, but their offense can keep them in any game most likely. I expect that going forward as well. They've clinched a playoff berth. They're off this week, but a lot of things to celebrate in that off week as they get back into region play next week and move forward into the playoffs this year. So while Helena is struggling right now in the season, they're reeling after 5 consecutive losses, the latest of which a 35-14 loss to Wetumpka. They've shown some promise moving forward over the last several games. They had Wetumpka at halftime. They were only down 14-7. Wetumpka takes the opening kickoff of the second half back for a touchdown. That ends up sparking their offense. They go ahead, run away with that one, win 35-14. But Helena showed some promising things over the last few weeks, and I think they have a solid chance to upset Benjamin Russell, who is the team they'll be taking on this Friday night. Benjamin Russell, while they're 6-1, while they've been ranked a lot of the season, coming off a 15-14 win over Minor where they struggled, the offense only averaging 23.6 points per game as they're struggling as well. Now Helena, on the other hand, only scoring 11.4 points per game and giving up 28.3. So we're going to have to see some different things from them in this game as well. But Helena has the kind of team that's shown over the last few weeks they can keep it close in that first half, and that's all they need to do to be able to pull off an upset against a team like Benjamin Russell. Wetumpka and Opelika are different animals, but a team like Benjamin Russell, if they can keep it close in that first half and have a chance in the second half, they've gained enough confidence over the last few weeks that they could upset Benjamin Russell this Friday night. They're definitely going to keep it close, and I have a feeling it could go down to the last few minutes of the fourth quarter as these two teams look to pick up another region win. So Chelsea and Chilton County both will be looking for their first region win of the season this Friday night in Week 9 of the 2017 football season. It's been a down season for both of these schools. Specifically, Chelsea sitting winless right now at 0-7. Chilton County has at least picked up one win. They sit at 1-7. You've heard me say all season long that Chelsea is going to win a game that they shouldn't win. This is a game they should win and a game they will win. Just looking at this past week, Chelsea picks up a loss. They lose 37-10 to Opelika, but they competed strong in that game, especially in the first half. And if it weren't for a couple of mistakes, they would have really been in that game late as well. The offense still struggling to convert at times, but this is a defense in Chilton County that Chelsea should be able to score some points on, should have a solid outing. They lose 55-28, as we mentioned a couple minutes ago, to Pelham last week. So Chilton County kind of reeling right now, despite having that one more win. I just think that Chelsea's the better team against common opponents. Chelsea has looked better this season. I think they get that first win this Friday night. These guys are fighting way too hard. Coach Elmore, his team, none of them have given up despite the record. I think they win this week. Then they get some confidence. They have a game against Helena. I think they might win that one too. I think they could finish the season on winning 2 of their last 3, if not winning all 3, including losing that last game of the season. So this is a big chance for them to gain some confidence moving forward into next season, showing those younger guys, especially for the seniors, showing those younger guys that you never give up, never quit, and stuff can happen, good things can come. So I expect Chelsea to pick up a big first win of the season this Friday night against Chilton County. We have two 5A matchups this Friday night, but it starts with our only in-county matchup in the 5A classification. That's going to be Shelby County traveling to Briarwood. The Wildcats will be taking on the number one team in the 5A classification, and for very good reason. Briarwood has been one of the best teams, not only in 5A, but the entire state this season. And it starts with their defense, and the defense giving up after last week's game 9.1 points per game, still under 10 points per game this late in the season is an unreal statistic. I'm pretty sure they lead the state in that statistic. They pick up a 49-6 or a 49-14 win this past Friday night over Woodlawn, while the Wildcats on the opposite end of that kind of score, they lose 49-6 to Pleasant Grove this past Friday night. So Briarwood clearly head and heels above where Shelby County is right now. The Lions sitting at 7-0 on the season have clinched a playoff spot. They have a chance at a region championship this Friday night if certain things unfold. Either way, I expect them to win this Friday night. I expect them to win again the week after against Pleasant Grove. I think they finished for the second year in a row undefeated in region play, and it's just been unbelievable on the defensive side of the ball, as we've mentioned, but the offense, now scoring 30.9 points per game, isn't talked about enough. You've got not only junior running back J.R. Tranrino, who's got 7 touchdowns in his last 2 games. We'll talk about him a little bit later on in the SCR Star of the Week segment, but you've also got sophomore running back Luke Pruitt, who had 128 yards on 13 carries this past Friday night, and I've seen him show some promise all season long. He shows he has the ability to carry that workload too. So not only do defenses have to worry about the starting running back, but they have to worry about the backup too in this system. And you've got guys like Michael Ayers at quarterback and Hudson Hartsfield and Carson Eddy at receiver who can both go over 100 yards if they need to. This is an offense that's very dynamic, matches perfectly with this defense. It's going to lead to a big win over Shelby County Friday night, and I think an undefeated regular season as they look to redeem last year's semifinal loss in the playoffs. This is the best team in the 5A classification. If they keep playing this way, they'll win a state championship this year. So we've already mentioned Vincent, we've mentioned Thompson, we've mentioned Pelham, and we've mentioned Briarwood. Those teams all clinch a playoff berth. Our last team to do so already is the Calera Eagles. They pick up a playoff berth this past Friday night with a 41-14 win over Jemison, as the offense really, despite turnovers, there were 9 combined turnovers in that game. I believe 5 by Jemison, 4 by Calera, and that's something Coach Zal told me a couple weeks back they've got to cut out in order to be a good playoff team. They've still got a couple weeks to work that kind of stuff out, but they're sitting pretty on the defensive side of the ball. Their offense is putting up great numbers other than the turnover category. So we have them clinch a playoff spot. They're looking good. And this week they get a Sumter Central team who lost 58-8 to Demopolis last Friday night. They're 1-7. Calera 4-3 on the other hand. So this is going to be a one-sided matchup yet again. You won't get a feel for really where Calera is at as far as improving on some things, because they should win this one handily with a Sumter Central team that's giving up 41.6 points per game. I expect Calera to score at least that. They might even top 50 in this game in a very big region win. As they move forward, they're fighting for that 2 seed in the region. If they can win these next 2 ball games, they've got a good chance to do that. I think they will get that number 2 seed in the region play, which would be huge moving forward into the playoffs with who they play in that first round and setting up their bracket-wise. So Calera, a great team so far this season. They've had a couple of games that could have gone either way. They probably should be closer to 6-1 right now versus 4-3. So they've shown a lot of promise. I expect that to keep happening and keep rolling this Friday night against Sumter Central. So our last AHSAA game this week is going to be Montevallo. They'll be taking on Gordo at home. Gordo, a good, very solid football team in the 3A classification, a state championship favorite. They've won state championships the past few years. Very good football team that's ranked inside the top 5 of the 3A classification. They're coming off a 34-27 win over a very good American Christian team as well that handled Montevallo easily earlier this year, giving them their first region loss. I believe that game was something like 51-6. So it shows what kind of team Gordo is to be able to beat American Christian. Montevallo, they lose 51-36 this past Friday night, but didn't give up in that game, down 31-0 at the half. They're facing a lot of injuries, have a lot of youth on the field at this point in the season. So for those guys to come in and show that they can fight and not give up in a game like that, come back, only lose 51-36. They scored 36 second half points. Just shows the kind of fight that those guys have, not only for themselves but for their coaching staff and so on. So Gordo's not going to have any sympathy for them. They'll come in and they'll do what they do. They'll be one of the best teams in the state, but at least we know that Montevallo showed they will fight until the end and give it all they have against a very good football team. Before we get to our SCR Star of the Week segment, where we'll talk about some great individual performances, we've got the AISA and ACSC to cover. Hope was off in the ACSC. Evangel, however, on Thursday night, they beat the defending AISA Class A state champions in Marengo Academy. They win that one 12-0, shut out Marengo Academy, so a very big win for them to cap off 11-man play. They'll finish things off this Friday night in the regular season-wise in an 8-man game at home at the Evangel Sports Complex there in Alabaster off Highway 119. Their first game there in a very long time, so should be exciting for all of their home fans to be able to head out there and see a football game this Friday night as they look to finish undefeated in ACSC play and head to the semifinals of the playoffs that following week. The AISA, on the other hand, Kingwood, Cornerstone, Coosa Valley, they all lose big matchups in region play. Cornerstone by far had the toughest as they took on Macon East, a very good football team in the AISA, a favorite to win a state championship, also ranked in that classification as well. So not a good week as far as record-wise. Coosa Valley, Cornerstone, they do play this Friday night, however. Should be a very entertaining matchup with seeding in the playoffs on the line for both of those teams. From what I've seen this year, Coosa Valley can fight. They can play a tough first half, but depth-wise, I think Cornerstone, as long as they're healthy and there's no injuries to worry about, they should be able to pick up a win in that one. That'll be the biggest game as far as AISA goes this Friday night, as Cornerstone and Coosa Valley will square off in an in-county matchup. As we do every week, we'll end the segment with what's my favorite part of the show, and I'm sure all of yours as well, considering we have a lot of student athletes watching this show, and that's our SCR Star of the Week, whereas other outlets and other ways you get your stars and your players of the week, you have votes, you have individual players recognized. I try to make sure that we recognize as many players as possible, get as many names out there as we can, and while this week I'm going to do that, I'm going to name several SCR Stars of the Week. There's going to be one that sticks out from the rest of the pack. He's right here at Vincent High School. He's right here actually warming up behind me in practice. But before we get to him, we'll talk about the rest of the guys that stood out this past Friday night. And it's going to start out at Thompson, as it seems to every week, as they just have 4 or 5 guys on both sides of the ball that seem to stick out every single week that they step onto the field. And it starts, as I mentioned, in the Thompson segment, the Edwards cousins, Ahmad and Mo. Ahmad, 11 catches, 113 yards. I believe he had 3 touchdowns. Mo, he has 4 catches, 106 yards. Those two guys, first off, for Ahmad, he's just having an unbelievable season. He's over 100 yards per game easily. And then you have Mo, who his yards per catch is just unbelievable. I think he's leading the team in touchdowns still to this moment as well. So just unbelievable to see what those two guys alone are doing. But then you have their quarterback, who continues to feed them the ball perfectly on almost every single pass. Talia Tagovailoa in the win this past Friday night. He was 23 of 33, 296 yards and 3 touchdowns. While he did have an interception, he also added 6 rushes and 30 more yards on the ground, as well as another touchdown. So 4 total touchdowns and close to 320 yards of total offense for Tagovailoa. Unbelievable to see the kind of talent he is as just a junior. He'll be back next year, and people are going to be oohing and eyeing, as they already are, over him for his senior year. And then the 2 running backs, I mentioned them last week on this show, and I'll continue to do so just simply because they can be featured just like those 3 guys can through the air. Joseph Ford, Shadrick Bird. Shad, he had 17 rushes, 142 yards, a touchdown against Spain Park in that 40-17 win. And then you had Ford come in, and he puts up 13 more carries for 80 yards. So those guys over 200 yards combined, as they've done several times this season. When you have that kind of stability to put up those kind of yards with not just your receivers and your quarterback, but your running backs, that shows the offensive line you have, it shows the team you have, and you pair that with a defense. It's a lot like Briarwood in the fact that they're going to be a favorite to win the state championship because they're so balanced at every position. We'll move on to another team that really stood out this past Friday night, specifically offensively. That's Pelham. Matthew Rye out there, the quarterback for the Panthers. 4 of 7, 85 yards, a touchdown through the air. Might not seem like a lot, but for a guy that runs the ball first, that's a great game for him through the air. And then he adds 7 rushes for 165 yards and 2 touchdowns on top of that to go near 300 yards all-purpose and 3 touchdowns. An unbelievable performance for Matthew Rye this past Friday night as he helps Pelham clinch a playoff spot with a 55-28 win over Chilton County. He's not doing it alone. He's got several playmakers around him, including Nick Blackburn, had a solid game as well. I believe he had around 84 rushing yards. And then you throw in Brandon Sledge and some other guys on that side of the ball as well. They have way too many offensive weapons. Edward Gibson as well, I forgot to mention him, but some great talent there on the offensive side of the ball around Rye at the quarterback position. But that leads us to our next team, Briarwood. Several guys stood out there this past Friday night. While Carson Eddy didn't have his best game, he still had 55 yards, I believe, or somewhere around that receiving-wise. Didn't write his exact stats down, but a couple other guys I did want to touch on were Luke Pruitt and J.R. Trainrino, the two running backs, the running back tandem there. Pruitt, as I mentioned earlier, 13 carries, 126 yards, a touchdown for him. Unbelievable. Just a sophomore, kind of like Trainrino was last year. But speaking of Trainrino, he goes for 3 more touchdowns this past Friday night in a big win for them. That gives him 7 total in the past 2 games. He had 4 the previous week. So moving forward, those 2 guys at the running back position, an unbelievable talent to have to pair with that impressive defense, as well as Michael Ayers at the quarterback position. He was 7 of 9, 123 yards and 2 touchdowns this past Friday night in that win. So the Lions playing extremely well on the offensive side of the ball, and getting better is the scary thing with that defense, as I said several times. That gives them a solid chance to win a state championship. Also in the 5A classification, Cornelius Brown had a very solid game, ran 3 times for 34 yards, but 13 of 17 for 181 yards through the air, 4 touchdowns. So that's the impressive part. There was, I believe he did throw 1 interception and some turnovers by the rest of his offense as well, but he found several different receivers. Very good playmaker there at the quarterback position. He can find that open guy, especially with his height. I believe he's around 6'5". He's a great athlete. So Cornelius Brown at Calera, one of our SCR Stars of the Week as well. Now we move on to our final guy. This is a guy that I've mentioned several times, has stood out from the pack, and that's Vincent Hardy. And he's done it for the last 4 weeks. As I mentioned, behind me right now, practicing for this Friday night's game, a chance that they can clinch the playoffs. But Chris Hardy has just been unbelievable. This past Friday night in a big 32-22 win over Horseshoe Bend, he goes 31 times for 355 yards and 3 touchdowns. Unbelievable. That you don't go over 300 yards as a running back. That's an unreal occasion, a special occasion for him. He gives all the glory every week to his offensive line, and clearly you have to have a solid offensive line to be able to do that. But an unbelievable talent by him. And he's not solely doing it by himself. He's got plenty of playmakers around him that can take the attention off as well. Dusty Davis, quarterback, Xavier Kelly, wide receiver, and several others as well. But Chris Hardy specifically, 355 yards this past week, 255 the week before that, 213 the week before that, and 171 to start this 4-game winning streak. So over his last 4 games, during that winning streak, 994 total yards and 13 touchdowns in 4 games. That's just unreal. 248.5 yards per game. He'll look to have another one of those solid performances this Friday night in our game of the week out here as Vincent takes on Reeltown at home. Going to be a very important region matchup for them towards making the playoffs this year. I'll be here for that game. Should be a blast to see. We'll have great coverage on Friday night as well. As always, I appreciate all you guys tuning in, listening to the show as you do every week. But just some unbelievable performances individually as well as team-wise this past Friday night. I'll look for that to continue this Friday night and some big matchups. But keep up the good work, guys. And as always, I appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you Friday night.